Inclisiran is a new type of therapy. It harnesses the body's natural processes for RNA interference. And it's a double-stranded molecule that goes specifically to the liver, where it's localized, taken up, and it works. Its mode of action is inside the hepatocyte, where it suppresses the synthesis of the PCSK9 protein. So it really stops production of the PCSK9 protein. The monoclonal will sort of mop it up in the circulation. This drug turns it off in the hepatocyte, and by doing that it dramatically lowers LDL cholesterol. So it's a new therapy. It's given rather infrequently. So we're testing it to see if it's effective, as we know it is, but how effective is it, and how safe is it in patients, and especially those with cardiovascular disease. So specifically, ORION-10 examined patients who have atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, so people with high-risk disease, prior bypass, stents, acute coronary syndromes, who had an LDL cholesterol of 70 or higher, despite being on maximally tolerated statin therapy or statins plus ezetimibe, and a small percent had clinically documented statin intolerance. So we randomized the patients to Inclisiran or placebo for 18 months. And patients got injections of Inclisiran or placebo at days 1 and 90, and then every 6 months thereafter, to test the hypothesis that giving this drug infrequently would work and would it lower LDL. What we saw was that at day 510 there was a 58% reduction in LDL cholesterol beyond what statins were doing. So 58% over placebo, which had high intensity statin also. And when we looked at the average reduction over the duration of the study from days 90 to 540, to see if that infrequent dosing worked well, we saw a 56% average reduction over the entire time frame. So we concluded, and those were the two co-primary endpoints, we concluded that Inclisiran met them and that it potently and durably lowers LDL cholesterol. Because it's a new drug, we wanted to make sure it was safe. So we looked at safety signals in the liver, the kidney, in the muscle, as well as in the blood system, and saw really no safety concerns at all, no different than placebo. One patient in the hematology signal had a low platelet count, but it turns out he had a low platelet count before he started Inclisiran, and it only went up during the trial. So it really shouldn't count against the study drug, but it does because of how we do the statistical plan. So no safety signal, it was well tolerated and very potent and durable. So it's important, I think, for everyone watching to understand that Inclisiran is still investigational. The sponsor has publicly said it will file with the US FDA in late December and with the European authorities in 2020. So if approved, and we hope it is, but once it is approved, if approved, this would be a drug that you could give instead of a monoclonal antibody to patients who are on orally maximized therapy, statins or statin plus ezetimibe, but it will be given infrequently. So if you give a monoclonal, you give that about 26 times a year in most patients. Some take it 12 times, but most take it 26 times a year. This would be given twice a year. So it's a more convenient dosing, we believe, of every 6 months, which is about the frequency that patients see their healthcare providers in most places in the world. I think it's very important to know if new therapies also reduce clinical events. So we looked at that with a pre-specified endpoint that was hypothesis generating in ORION-10 and saw that there were fewer major adverse cardiovascular events in the Inclisiran group than placebo, about a 3% absolute reduction. So we're testing it in a large outcomes trial that's run by the group at Oxford called ORION-4. It's taking about 80% of the population from the UK NHS and about 20% from the United States, and it's going to be a 5-year outcomes trial. It's ongoing, so we'll have outcome data in a few years. We're also going to take everyone in ORION-10 and previous ORION-11 and in the soon-to-be announced ORION-9 results, and they'll roll into long-term follow-up studies. So we'll continue to collect safety data as this drug goes through the regulatory review process. How it will change clinical practice: if you have a patient who cannot get their LDL low enough with oral therapy, once approved, you would have an option that you could give them twice a year that would bring it down more than 50% more, which would get most patients to the goals they need to be at.